It's Monday, and that so happens to be the day that I like to talk about monsters. Hello, everybody. I am Geoff Arbuckle, and this is Monster Mondays, presented to you by Film Seizure. We continue our march towards the conclusion of the Heisei period of Godzilla films with 1994's Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla. Now, a couple of things about this. First and foremost, 1994 did serve as the 40th anniversary of the Godzilla franchise beginning, and this movie kind of feels like a celebration of that. But the real celebration won't come until the following year with the next movie. But this movie kind of has a lot of things kind of going for it that makes it feel like this is a celebration of the entirety of the Godzilla franchise. Some of that plays up very nicely for those people like me who kind of like the idea of Godzilla as a hero. He does finish this movie as a hero. But you can also tell that there are some unnecessary things kind of thrown into this movie that makes it feel like there's some sort of a celebration here, or some need to kind of insert some additional items into an already pretty straightforward plot that you didn't really need a lot of extra stuff. For example, Mothra's here, although Mothra's appearance in this is not very vital to the story. Mothra doesn't show up to battle Space Godzilla or anything like that. She's just here. Her twin fairies show up a couple of times to warn of disaster. None of that stuff was really all that necessary. To be perfectly honest with you, this is probably my least favorite of the Heisei period. It's not as tight as the previous film was, in my opinion. It's not quite as emotional as the next movie in the series is, and it's not quite as action-packed as the King Ghidorah and Mothra entries that we saw earlier in the 90s. So this movie is kind of a little bit of a misstep, but not necessarily a terrible movie. There's still some things in this that I like quite a bit, which of course I'm going to talk about before the end of this. However, the one real notable thing in this is right in the title: Godzilla versus Space Godzilla. Now, first and foremost, Space Godzilla is not a new concept. I'll talk a little bit about that here in a few minutes, but this was really the first time that Godzilla ever really truly fought another version of himself. You could say, well, technically in 1974, the first time that Godzilla and Mechagodzilla faced off, Mechagodzilla was wearing the suit to make him look like Godzilla. Okay, so yes, on screen we did see two Godzillas kind of face off against one another. However, that really wasn't Godzilla. This really technically is, just in a slightly twisted way. Like I said, Godzilla, or I should say Space Godzilla, was first really kind of conceived in the late 70s as one of the many concepts to either continue or relaunch the series that all kind of fell apart until Godzilla 1984, or The Return of Godzilla, or Godzilla 1985, whatever it is you'd like to call it, depending on where you're from. Before that really did relaunch the series. That said, though, this has got a really cool concept around it. It is one of my three things that I do like about this movie, which I will discuss once we get to that portion of this episode. But this movie, because of the way Godzilla had been depicted over the 5 previous movies that had really Godzilla as this kind of bad guy creature, something to be scared of again. With Godzilla Jr. coming along in the previous entry, it was clear that there was a hit there with the kids. And so what they really wanted to do was to kind of turn up the all ages, or the more lighthearted tone, and certainly have Godzilla be less of the villain, but instead have a different bad guy that Godzilla can fight. Really what ends up happening is Godzilla is kind of turned into a father figure that is desperate to save his son from the Space Godzilla creature. And when I get into the plot, that will become a little bit more clear. But and also on top of that, Godzilla Jr.'s looks had been modified considerably from the last movie, whereas before he did really, aside from having the big eyes and kind of a friendlier face, his body was a little bit more in line of what Godzilla looked like, just on a smaller scale. In this, it's much more cartoonish. In fact, if anybody remembers the TV show Dinosaurs, it really kind of matched that appearance a little bit more. Not my favorite design for Godzilla Jr., but still very cute and cuddly and very likable. You don't want to see this little guy get attacked like he is at the start of this movie, but still, it is rumored, however, that this suit for Godzilla Jr., or Little Godzilla as they call him, he's grown up quite a bit from the last movie. He's more along the size of Godzilla's kid in the 60s movies, where he kind of comes up to Godzilla's waist. He's a much bigger than he was in the last movie. But the rumor was that Godzilla Jr. or Little Godzilla was going to end up with his own show, and that the reason why this suit was used was to kind of act as either, while we have the suit, let's just use it for the movie. The TV show didn't happen, so let's use it for the movie. Or this movie was kind of a backdoor way into bringing Godzilla Jr. to TV screens that way. Whatever the situation is, it was a definite change while still holding on to some of the looks that was seen in the previous movie. So, weird meteorites crash land on Earth, creating these kind of bizarre crystalline structures on a place called Birth Island. Now, Birth Island is where Godzilla Jr. lives and is where Godzilla Sr., I guess you could say, calls home. Meanwhile, there is a new kind of anti-Godzilla mech suit that's been created that's called Mogra. Now, it looks just like Mogra from the Mysterians. I had covered that movie a few months back. It has an updated version of that look, but they turned it into an acronym, which I can't remember exactly what Mogra stands for, but basically it is a new version of Mechagodzilla, really. And it is employed by G-Force, or it was built by G-Force. However, there is a little bit of a schism in G-Force between those who want the more militaristic side of things, that really want Godzilla to be dead, hence why they built Mogra, and the more scientific side of things that's led by our heroine, Miki Sagusa, who is wanting to find a way to utilize her telepathic ability to soothe Godzilla, or to bring him into under a little bit more control, to essentially keep him out of heavily populated areas. But Mickey is warned by the twin fairies that usually accompany Mothra that there is a terrible creature coming to Earth. And sure enough, that thing is picked up on radar, headed straight for Earth. So Mogra is dispatched to intercept. And what this thing is a gigantic, huge crystal asteroid, basically with a little Godzilla stuck to the bottom of it. It's almost like like he travels with his own materials. We do find out what he does with that, because he's always flying around with a bunch of these crystals on his back. We do discover later that as he lands, he spreads the crystals out, and it's a way to feed him power, basically. So Mogra goes out there, does a little bit of a dust up with Space Godzilla. Space Godzilla has no problem with Mogra and continues on to Earth. And when it lands on Earth, it immediately decides to attack Godzilla Jr. Now, Big G comes and he tries to first fight off Space Godzilla, then protect his son. However, he is way overmatched. Space Godzilla is particularly powerful, and he's not really messing around. So he ends up capturing Godzilla Jr. and imprisoning him in like a crystal jail cell, almost like a little dungeon made out of the crystals that he always carries around with him. And then he decides to head towards Tokyo, and Godzilla goes on the chase. Now, this is where we find out what Space Godzilla really is. Somebody steps up and says, okay, well, remember Biollante and Mothra? They separately carried Godzilla cells into space. And one of them must have had cells that fell into a black hole and then emerged through a white hole. And because of that transition and the various other cosmic stuff happening with like supernovas and radiation from stars and so forth, well, apparently those cosmic energies created Space Godzilla, or so the theory goes. And that's the theory they go with. I love these movies when somebody spits out that crazy, insane theory and everybody's like, that sounds good enough for me. That's what's going on. It's Space Godzilla. So in all this, we also end up having a moment in which the Yakuza show up to kidnap Mickey so that they can use her psychic link with Godzilla to basically control the monster for mob things. It is a completely useless 10-minute segment that takes her getting captured and our guy heroes, one of which has a bit of a thing for Mickey, and she has a thing for him, to basically team up with these other guys to save her. And it's completely pointless in the movie, but just wanted to throw out there, not only do we have Godzilla, a baby Godzilla, a Space Godzilla, a robot named Magra who is there to destroy a Godzilla, anyone, it doesn't matter. It wants to destroy a Godzilla. And not only that, but we also have these little discs that are getting put on the back of Godzilla's brain or head so that they can control his brain or soothe him or domesticate him or something. But then you also have the Yakuza. And we also find out during that time that Mickey can also not just have psychic powers to connect to people's brains or to Godzilla's brains, but she also has the power of telekinesis, because we needed that for some reason. And also we have Mothra's twin fairies. There's a lot of stuff happening in this movie that's not really necessary if you haven't picked up the gist there, but allow me to continue, because there is still some fun stuff happening in this movie. So after she's saved, Space Godzilla arrives in this city and basically begins to attack. And again, Magra, after being repaired, after returning to Earth, is sent out to take on Space Godzilla. However, the guy who's piloting it, and this is one thing that is kind of cool in this movie, there is this undercurrent of what do you do with Godzilla. Naturally, you have some people who say don't hurt it. Naturally, you have people who say kill it. Well, one of our main heroes who pilots Magra is one of the people who really wants to kill Godzilla. So as he's piloting Magra, he notices that Godzilla's in pursuit too, and he actually breaks off pursuit with the intent to use Magra to kill Godzilla and then deal with Space Godzilla. The other two guys piloting Magra ain't into this idea, so they end up basically knocking the guy out and taking control of Magra to go fight what they were supposed to, Space Godzilla. Anyway, so they show up, they try to fight Space Godzilla. It's not going exactly all that well. They do get it with a couple of laser shots, but it's just too powerful. Godzilla arrives on the scene and is also kind of overmatched. So Space Godzilla is powerful enough to take on Magra, the robot machine thing, and real Godzilla, and really doesn't seem to have much problem with it. However, I think it's Godzilla who ends up discovering that the crystals that are always placed around the place and grow out of the ground that Space Godzilla carries around with him basically powers him. It siphons the energy from wherever it can get it, and siphons it through these crystals, and then there's these two gigantic crystals that are on Space Godzilla's shoulders that basically act as the receptors of the power. So as Godzilla starts blowing up some of the crystals, now you can start getting some hits in on Space Godzilla. They realize that Space Godzilla specifically is guarding a tower that it is siphoning the energy from. So Mothra helps helps Godzilla destroy the tower, which then allows for them to deal more pain and injury to Space Godzilla, blowing up the crystals that are on his shoulders, and eventually they begin getting the upper hand. Mothra is destroyed. Godzilla is able to, using the extra power that we saw at the end of the previous movie, where he is dealing out a lot of extra atomic energy, is able to essentially disintegrate Space Godzilla. And again, we see that shot where his life force ascends into the atmosphere and dissipates from there. And so at the end of the movie, there is a consideration of, well, what should we do with Godzilla? Well, in the end, Godzilla was fighting for the same thing that the humans were, which was to get rid of this worst threat in Space Godzilla. So they start to realize that, you know what, maybe he isn't so bad after all. And they kind of they kind of salute him as a hero. Mickey frees him from the little disc on the back of his neck that she can use to control him. He kind of Godzilla kind of turns and nods knowingly, like, hey, thanks for releasing me, that's great. And he heads back home, and Mickey, there's the guy that she's kind of sweet on, she shows him a picture with his mind of little baby Godzilla free from his crystalline prison, and he has learned to blow little atomic fiery bubbles, so that he is eventually going to learn how to do exactly what his dad can do. And Godzilla heads off into the ocean, and a nice little song is played for him. And like I said, it really does feel like that they are celebrating 40 years of Godzilla. You got multiple Godzillas, you got Mothra here, there's discussion of stuff that's happened in previous movies. Godzilla has transitioned from being something that everybody wants dead to something that most people still want to be alive, at least for now. The next movie will prove slightly different when we see Godzilla for the first time in the next film. So it's and then as the credits roll, we also still see Mothra out in space, kind of flying around Earth. I don't know what she was doing to help stop Space Godzilla. Apparently that was her day off, but whatever. She's still out there. She's still protecting Earth. Godzilla is still protecting Earth on the ground, and everything is, I guess, peachy keen here. Now let's get to my three things I do like about this movie. I know I was kind of harsh when I said that this movie is not really one of my favorites in the whole series. It's my least favorite of this run in particular. It's got that extra stuff with the Yakuza. It's got all the extra stuff with Mothra and her twin fairies making an appearance. I don't know if that was kind of a backdoor to prepare for the rebirth of Mothra movies that were to come out in a couple of years. I don't know what it is, but it's a little too busy for a relatively straightforward story, where you could have taken out some of the busy stuff and really started seeing people's opinions about Godzilla change as he fights for, to destroy Space Godzilla, or protects Mothra, or does something that is a little bit more heroic. You could have swapped some of those scenes that weren't needed out for some of those that would have been more character building. But whatever, it's fine. I still have three things I like about this movie, and this movie is far from the worst of the series. It's just not one of my favorites. So first and foremost, there is this scene, and it's a very short scene in the grand scheme of things, but it's something that I love in movies, particularly in the 90s. I don't know what it is, but it made me, if you shown me a frame from this scene, I would have said, oh yeah, that's totally the 90s. But there's a scene in which Mickey and the guy that she's into, Koji, they are on Infant Island after Godzilla has headed towards the Japanese mainland. And she is just kind of trying to figure out what she should do. She does not want Godzilla killed like a lot of the rest of G-Force does, and Koji as well. But she also doesn't know if she necessarily feels right being able to control this creature. Space Godzilla is obviously more dangerous. It posed a threat to the smaller, defenseless Godzilla, and she's just kind of sitting around having a deep thought about it. And Koji comes up, and they're on the beach. And what's funny, because like most of the time you see Mickey, she's wearing like jumpsuits or slacks and bomber jackets or something, because she is part of this UN group that is tasked with dealing with Godzilla. But she's wearing this really nice and pretty dress and everything. And Koji comes up. He's dressed normally too, because I guess he's off duty for now. He doesn't need his G-Force outfit or his uniform. And they're talking, and they're talking about basically killing Godzilla versus love in general. And it's this first scene that you can tell that they really have something for each other. They just have opposing views on something that's very important to both of them. But it's shot in this scene on the beach at sundown, and it's the whole frame is orange because of the sundown, and you can see it, kind of glistening off the sea, and off in the distance, and this really beautiful little island that they're filming this on. And it's a very pretty shot. It's one of the best. No, I'm just going to go ahead and say it is the best shot on a technical level that any of these movies have had prior to this. And in fact, to be honest with you, I don't know if there is going to be a prettier shot in any of the movies left in this series. But it is a gorgeous shot, and it's an important shot that really kind of helps with that orange hue, the setting, the way that the characters are dressed, the way that it's sundown and all of that. It gives a kind of an emotional punch to this movie that needed to be done more in this movie, instead of all that extra stuff. So, small thing, very 90s in the way that the composition is, the way that it's shot. It also almost kind of looks like a James Bond movie, where there's a certain look to a James Bond movie in every frame, particularly if you have a particularly beautiful shot. It reminded me immediately of a 90s James Bond movie. All right, second, the Space Godzilla design is really, really cool. All of the extra crystal stuff on him, there's a purpose for it. It's how he gains his power. It makes him tougher than regular Godzilla, but also there is a demonic angle to the character as well that makes him particularly scary. He's a twisted version of Godzilla, and Godzilla is already kind of a bad guy, but he's very cool. I mean, like it looks like more of his teeth show. It looks like he doesn't really have lips like the regular Godzilla kind of does. It's not pronounced, but he has a way to cover up and show his teeth as needed. He's got some of the crystals that are like on his head really kind of play off almost like horns. He is legitimately a demonic version of the Godzilla creature, and he's bigger than Godzilla too, which makes him that much more imposing, even when he's not flying around with his big backpack full of medicinal crystals or whatever those are. They do kind of look like new age crystal type stuff. But even without that all over his back, he is still considerably bigger than Godzilla. So he's an imposing character, and he's an imposing figure, and it's done very, very well to kind of give us something to really be scared of if you're going to push Godzilla more towards being a little bit more heroic and a little bit more identifiable, because he is just a father desperate to protect his son, essentially. So having this kind of scarier Godzilla in the form of Space Godzilla is a really smart idea, and I really like that design of that creature. And then thirdly, the final act of the movie, this movie is about, it's about 110 minutes almost. And the entire third act, which is about 40 minutes, is entirely devoted. It's about 40 minutes. It's entirely devoted to the final showdown between Godzilla and Space Godzilla with Mothra in the mix. And it's pretty much nonstop. It's exactly what people want out of these type of giant monster movies, particularly if it's a monster fight movie like this is. It really, really, really keeps going in this scene, and it does not hold, or does not slow down just because, we need to cut back to the human characters, or we need to, cut back on the special effects cost or whatever. It's able to really mix in all of those stories in that final act decently, while still giving us what we all want, which is the big fight between these three characters, these three creatures. And there's ups and downs in that fight too. It's almost like watching like a Rocky movie, where a big chunk of the movie is going to be devoted to that final fight in the end, the big climax, and it does that very well. It's one of the longer uninterrupted fight scenes up to this point in the series, at the very least, and it's much appreciated when you really want to just watch monsters fight each other. So while this is not one of my favorites, and it's my least favorite of the series, there are still plenty of good things in it, particularly when it comes to the monster type of stuff. I just wish that some of the extra fat was trimmed or replaced with other things that would have meant a little bit more in the long run. But that wraps up this week's Monster Mondays. Don't forget to check out new episodes of Film Seizure each and every Wednesday morning, and you can get new installments of Monster Mondays each Monday afternoon by going to filmseizure.com. Both of those shows are also found in places where fine podcasts are found, like SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, and Audible. We even upload our episodes with just the static image, nothing fancy, to YouTube as well. So you can also subscribe to us there. You can also hop on over to Facebook and Twitter, and you can follow us by searching for Film Seizure. And while you're at it, I've got a website, bmovieanima.com. You can go there every Friday morning and read new text articles. And you can also follow B Movie Anima on Facebook and Twitter by searching for just that. Hey, also, you can go over to YouTube and subscribe to the B Movie Anima channel, where you can find clips of movies that I use in my reviews from time to time, as well as my movie hosting show, B Movie Anima the Series. Season 2 just started on September 11th. So be sure that you go over there, subscribe to the channel, get caught up with the Season 1 episodes that are on YouTube. You can also see all of the Season 1 episodes on bmovieanima.com, and also be ready and be notified when new episodes are released. From basically now until Christmas Day, Season 2 is out there. So until next week, everybody, stay spooky.